Good evening, everyone. It's 1:27. Before we start, let me give a brief introduction of our speaker, Kristen Jacks. Kristen Jacks is a financial educator, author, and the founder of Money in Your 20s. Kristen worked for Kiplinger's Personal Finance magazine and the Mutual Fund magazine before becoming a writer and a speaker. Her new book on investing is a lively and a jargon-free resource for young adults or anyone new to investing. Kristen is a graduate of Duke University. Today's topic is tax-free retirement. Now let me turn the screen to Kristen. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you, Young.
I'll take over the admit.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to Greenwich Library. Can you also mute people as they come in? I don't think they know.
I will.
Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you to Greenwich Library for hosting such great programming. Tonight is super relevant, super informative, very dense, complicated. We're going to try to make it as simple as possible. But welcome to the Investing Discussion Group. This is the beginning of our third season. So last season, we really focused on the books that could transform your financial plan. And this season, Young and I spent a lot of time reaching out to people who've come to the webinars and asking, what do they most want us to focus on? And thank you to the people who responded. There were people who really wanted to know more about the economy and what does it mean, like economic indicators, or when the economy is slowing, or what, anything going on with the economy. What does that mean for their financial well-being? What does that mean for the short-term outlook with investing? So we're definitely going to cover that. People are always interested in the behavioral side of investing. The psychology of money was one of our most enjoyed webinars last year. So we're definitely going to cover that. We're going to cover the whole issue of like the high cost of college and what's a good strategy saving for it, and saving money on it. There's a whole science around that we are definitely going to cover this year. So this year is really all based on what, in the previous season, what people were really clamoring for. And then one of the things they were clamoring for was sort of tax advice, really like, are people being as smart as possible about a very, very complicated system? So that's really what tonight is all about. And planning ahead. Let me just mention, so we had so many wonderful webinars in the last 2 years. And here are some of the most popular: the psychology of money. We had webinars about bonds. We had webinars about paying for college, and especially sort of this secret merit aid that a lot of people don't necessarily understand, and how that can shave $20,000 off the cost of college. So all of these webinars, like the webinar we're doing tonight, they get recorded and then they live on Greenwich Library's YouTube channel. And it's very easy to find. So if you go to YouTube and in the search bar, you type in Greenwich Library, then you will see, and hopefully you can see this sort of white triangle, you will see that pop up. I mean, a few things will pop up, but what you're looking for is this white and green Greenwich Library logo on YouTube, and that'll take you to the Greenwich Library channel. And these videos are very, very easy to find. I mean, many of them are just right there, right in front of you.
I'm sorry, Kristen, let me cut in. The videos are also available on the library's website on the previous recording on our website too.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Okay, I'll have to check that out. Where is that on the website?
I can show you later.
Okay, maybe we'll do that at the end.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. All right, so yeah, so if any of those topics interest you from the past, they were very popular, so enjoy them. And then today we are doing, can you really have this tax-free retirement? So David McKnight published a book called The Power of Zero, where he walked you through, like, if you're very strategic and you really understand all the different parts of Social Security and tax law and tax brackets and insurance and all these different things, Roth IRAs, and traditional IRAs and all these things. If you really understand it, then you can have a lot of income in retirement, but be in the 0% tax bracket, which is kind of astonishing. But later on, I'll show you a real example of how someone can have like $81,000 in income and pay 0 federal tax, and it's all legal. So his book was very popular. It's kind of a sensation. So that's what we're doing today. And then planning ahead, we got a lot of requests for trying to tackle asset allocation. And we're going to go way beyond just stocks and bonds and real estate, because we're just for fun, we're going to look at what the top Ivy League endowments do and the top pension funds do and things like that. And they get pretty far afield. They're because of all the money they have, they can do really, really interesting things like private equity, and they have a lot of relationships with hedge funds. But it's kind of interesting to know what the smart money is doing, and then we're going to sort of distill it down to what like a typical investor can do. So that's October 22nd, and you can sign up for that now on the library website. Okay, but before we get started, big disclaimer. We're talking about money here, taxes, strategy. It's really, really important that you understand we are only trying to educate you. So this webinar is for educational purposes only. It is not intended to provide tax or investment advice. None of the tax strategies mentioned in this discussion group are specifically discouraged or recommended. Before making financial decisions, you are urged to consult a wide range of professionals, a tax expert, lawyer, financial advisor, all these experts who are aware of your particular needs and situation, because I think what you'll see is it is so personal. It is so personal to your age, your income, whether you're single, whether you're married. It is so, so personal. So we can teach you kind of general rules and general guidelines, but before you make a financial decision, don't just go by what we say. Okay. And also, please participate. This really is the investing discussion group. So if you're shy about unmuting, you can always just put a question in the chat. We always get people who are really knowledgeable, right? So I might say something and you might know something even smarter. So please participate, especially if you have something to share with people that could really benefit everybody. Okay, so can your retirement tax bill really be 0? Yes. I mean, I will show you an example of a lady who makes, who kind of takes in $81,000 a year in her retirement and is, subject to 0 federal tax, and it's all legal, right? So I just want you to know the answer is yes, that is possible. This is so personal. It's so unique to each person's situation, but yes, it's possible. And if it's possible, why not figure out how it is possible, and it's legal and what the rules are, right? So why not figure it out? It's very complicated. I put a picture of like a guy playing chess here because one, I liked the idea of the different parts that have different moves. I don't know if anyone, if this is relatable because are people still playing chess, but the rook and the queen and the knight, they all make different moves and have different, kind of superpowers. And you have to kind of know how to combine all of them and think several steps ahead to win the game. And that is absolutely true if you want, tax savings in general. But if you're being really aggressive, then you have to be kind of like a master of this game. So I'm going to stick with the chess analogy, and you'll see that I'm kind of breaking it into 4 parts, right? So we've got tax brackets or something. You're going to have to understand tax brackets. It's so funny because my first book was Money in Your 20s, and I started out just teaching young people, and they know nothing about tax brackets. Even the smart ones who go to the prestige schools and all that, they've just never heard of it. They don't understand it. Well, if you're going to play this game, you're going to have to understand tax brackets like the back of your hand. I mean, it's going to have to just pop into your mind like, oh, sure, that would be the 12% bracket. Oh, that would be the 22% bracket. Ooh, that's the top bracket. That's 37%. If you don't understand your marginal tax rate and how you got there and what would, kick you up to the next one or drop you down to the lower one, then you are behind. This is a big part of the game. So the first thing we're going to look at are tax brackets. Then, since this is all about retirement, we're going to look at Social Security, and it's not easy. So I was listening to podcasts leading up to this webinar, really just trying to make sure I did right by you guys. And there was one podcast in particular where this woman who runs the podcast, who's a Social Security expert, said there are 2,700 rules related to Social Security. So it's a little complex, but I will definitely tell you the part that is most relevant to, if you're going to collect benefits, how would they be taxed? Because if you're going to try to go for the 0% tax bracket, you want none of your Social Security taxed. And that's pretty tricky. It can be done. I'm going to show you, but it's pretty tricky. So we've got tax brackets you're going to have to understand, Social Security, then general tax law. You're going to have to understand general tax law. And it's complicated, right? The general tax law is very complicated. So, and then finally, there is this insurance piece. And David McKnight, who wrote The Power of Zero, who got everybody interested in this idea of, tax-free retirement, he started his career as an insurance salesman. He drank the Kool-Aid. He really believes in insurance as like this incredibly important part of a tax-free retirement. But by the way, it's the most controversial part. So you have a lot of financial gurus saying that is, bad advice. There are way too many fees. There are other ways to achieve these goals. So I'm going to stick pretty close to David McKnight and what he's saying in his book. But then I'm just going to, let you know that what he's saying on the insurance piece is pretty controversial. So, but those are our 4 areas. This is not all you need to know. I mean, it's for you personally and what's best for you and your family. There are so many other nuances. I mean, healthcare alone is a big area. If you plan to retire before 65 and you can't rely on Medicare, then how much income you want to show. And this has nothing to do with assets, right? This is not the money you have saved. You can have millions in, retirement assets, but in terms of your yearly income, there are ways to get subsidies for healthcare if you're no longer working and you have to go buy healthcare on your own. There are ways to get subsidies based on having less than 400% of the poverty level. So you want to, all of a sudden you want to show like a small amount of income because you want the lower healthcare. I mean, this stuff gets really complicated. Healthcare is one of those things that really makes things messy. And then on the other side, if you show too much income, you have Medicare surcharges. So I'm not even going there tonight. Like we just don't have the time. And who could listen to all of these moving pieces? So we're going to stick with 4. And David McKnight in his book never mentions healthcare anyway. So we're going to stick with these 4. But just so you know, if you're going to go down this road, there's a lot more to tackle. Okay, and spoiler alert, honestly, I mean, I will show you an example of someone who's in the 0% bracket and still getting 81,000 in income. I will show you that, but truth be told, really hugging the 0%, never getting out of the 0% tax bracket, that's going to be very hard. However, we have all these tax brackets, right? At the federal level, you could pay 0, you could pay 10%, 12%, 22%, 4%, 35%, 37%. Nobody wants to pay 35 or 37, but there are all different brackets. So it's pretty good news to find out that you could just, it's much more reasonable to hang out at the 12% bracket and then maybe pay 15% capital gains. So that's much more doable. And in fact, I kind of liken it to, there's climbing Mount Everest with the horrible conditions, frigid cold, ice, wind, peak at 29,000, right? Like you know, if you have like high income and lots of savings and lots of moving parts, it's going to be really almost impossible for you to get to 0%. It's going to be like summiting Mount Everest, but it's not going to be hard. It's not going to be impossible for you maybe to like get to the top of Mount Whitney in California. Beautiful. The weather usually cooperates. Hey, that would be a great accomplishment, right? Like you'd really like, you know, so it's sort of like, you know, the marathon versus the 10K. I mean, there are a lot of ways where if you set your mind to it, you can have a great outcome, but maybe it's not like the 0% tax bracket. Okay. So like I said, we're going to do there's sort of 4 areas to look at. There are tax brackets, Social Security, general tax law, and then insurance. And these are all the puzzle pieces that we're going to put together. So let's start with tax brackets. Now, right away, if you're a math person, if you're a numbers person, you see this visual and you're like, what a cute visual, right? And then the rest of the universe that hates math is already tuning out. They're already like hyperventilating. They're already saying, there's no way. I could never understand this. So let's just, you know, depending on who you are, you might need some deep breaths or stay calm. But yeah, tax brackets are not, I mean, they're so messy. I mean, there are 7 of them, and how your money, you know, falls into each bracket. I mean, we don't even have nice numbers. We have one nice number, 11,000, right? And then after that, it's like, well, if you're making, you know, between 0 and 11,000, you're going to get taxed at 10%. That's the only thing that doesn't look awful. Oh, I think, can you mute Janice, please? Okay, thanks. But then after that, I mean, you have like, okay, you have between 44,725 of income to 93,375 of income. You know, you're getting taxed at 22%. These are terrible, complicated numbers. And if you're single, it's one set of numbers. If you're married, it's another set of numbers. And then, by the way, there are other numbers if you're head of your household. If you're blind, I mean, it's crazy, right? But the fact is, even though it's messy and mathy and complicated, if you don't understand tax brackets, you've already lost this game. It is all about the tax brackets. So we're going to try to just make it, you know, really easy. So let's take Ben, for example. So here's Ben. Now, somebody keeps texting me. I just want to make sure. Okay, no, it's not related to this. Okay, so here's Ben. He's single, and his income, and I have income in quotes for a very important reason. His income is $71,850. Now, here's what's going on with income. Like all the money, if you listen to an IRS video, I happen to be such a geek. I actually watch all the videos that the IRS produces. So again, back on YouTube, if you go to YouTube and you put IRS in the search bar, you'll go to their webpage and you'll see all of their videos. And I think their videos are kind of fun and like very, you know, easy to explain. So if you watch these videos, you know, when they talk about income, there's all sorts of stuff going on. Like your income, if you sell a stock and you've made a gain, is a capital gain. That's not the income that we're talking about when we're looking at tax brackets just for, I mean, it is if it's a short-term gain, that's separate. But right here, we're saying Ben is single and his income is $71,850. Right off the bat, we're not talking about his long-term capital gains. We're not talking about if he owns a municipal bond, and that's not even taxed. So much of tax law is like, what income are we talking about? So let's just make it seem, you know, pretty simple. Like he has a bank account and he earns interest. He has a job, he earns wages, right? So we're just making his life like pretty straightforward. So Ben is single and his income is $71,850. Now, I think that anyone who's like an adult in America should know how to do this at their home, right? They should know, okay, that means the first thing I'm going to do with that amount of money is I'm going to apply the standard deduction, right? He's single, so his status is single. This really matters. The standard deduction is different if you're married, it's much higher. It's different if you're head of household, right? But we're just going to use single. So $71,850. Now we're going to deduct the standard deduction, and that's $13,850. So now we have $58,000 left. Okay, well now, let's look back at these tables, right? Well, what does this mean? Under 1,100 to 44,725. Like, what does all of that mean? Well, what it means is the $58,000 that Ben has after we apply the standard deduction is going to be distributed over these tax brackets, right? So 3 different tax rates are applied to portions of Ben's income. So hopefully for you, this is review. Hopefully somewhere along the way, you learned, when you did your tax software or met with your tax guy or whatever, and the tax software spit out a number, or your tax woman spit out a number, like, you knew how they got to that number. It's this way. If you have complicated taxes, they're applying itemized deductions. Your mortgage on your house, that interest is deductible, your state and local taxes. Or if you don't have very complicated taxes, you're just taking the standard deduction. So this guy earning $71,850, apply the standard deduction, you're down to $58,000, and then you hit the tax brackets, right? So anything between $0 and $11,000, that's going to get hit at 10%. Anything between the next level up is like the dollars after 11,000 and right at 44,725, that portion is going to get taxed at 12%. And then finally, the portion between 44,725 and 58,000 is going to get taxed at 22%, right? So it's complicated, but at the end of the day, Ben at this income is paying $8,068 total in federal tax, which equates to like 11% tax rate overall, right? He would say that his marginal tax rate is 22%. He would say he's in the 22% bracket. And the reason he would say that is every new dollar is hitting that bracket. That's the bracket he's hanging out in. And that's really important later on when we talk about Roth conversions. You kind of have to know what your marginal tax rate is. Because if you were going to take money from a traditional IRA and convert it to a Roth, you would get taxed, those dollars would get taxed at your top rate. All right. Okay. You know what? Let me look in the chat because it looks like we have questions. What does this say? Unless, was this you, Young, putting this in here? What is this?
Yeah, I put where to find the recorded program on our website. I put the link.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So hopefully you guys sort of understood what we did with Ben there and why his taxes are the way they are. So the question is, since David McKnight is saying, I can keep you in the 0% bracket, right? Well, what does that even mean? Well, what that means is I can keep you, like, you're not going to pay any federal tax as long as you don't have to show income greater than your standard deduction, right? So that's what he means. But, we still have the 10% bracket. We still have the 12% bracket. It's not the end of the day if you're paying at 12%. But what would that mean? How much income could you show in a calendar year that's considered part of your taxable income, your adjusted gross income, if you want to be in the 12% bracket? So you kind of want to hug the 12% bracket. You don't want to bump up to the 22% bracket. That makes perfect sense. Well, that's kind of a doable number. So we take the upper limit of the 12% bracket. So we take the 44,725. So that's as high as you can go without bumping into the next bracket, the 22% bracket. And then we add the standard deduction to that. And hopefully that makes sense to you. So really, anyone can come in and have $58,575 of income that they show, and they're not going above the 12% bracket. So some of their money will be taxed at 10% and some will be taxed at 12%. And that is a much easier goal if you are trying to keep your taxes down. Okay. Now, if this was really confusing to you and you haven't spent a lot of time understanding tax brackets, I am happy to share for free the Taxes 101 chapter of my book that I wrote for 20-somethings, where I do several examples and I really hold your hand and I really talk about, so it will not be confusing. Or if you want this for your niece or nephew or whatever, I'm happy to email it to you. So just email me, kjacks@moneyinyour20s.com. And I just send you an email attachment, which is a PDF of that chapter. But really, if you don't understand tax brackets, you've already lost the game. It is so essential to getting into a good tax bracket in retirement. Okay, so let's talk about these thresholds, right? So we're saying that if you want to pay 0% federal tax as a single person. Now, if you're married, it's different, right? Very often the married version of this is kind of double, right? So in the tax brackets, like the income ranges are double. I think in the standard deduction, it's close to double. I mean, I should have checked before this webinar, but I didn't. But I know, like, if you're married filing jointly, you're at 25,000 standard deduction or whatever. But I can't do too many different kinds of slides without being confusing. So right now I'm just talking about a single person. But if you're trying to figure this out, like, if you really want to be in 0%, you're only going to show 13,850 of income. That's going to be hard. But if you want to be in the 10%, if you don't mind being in the 10%, then that upper limit is $11,000 in income. So you can add that to your standard deduction, and you could for the year show 24,850 of income. Now, the critical thing here is the income that counts toward your taxes, right? So spoiler alert, we're going to find out that, Roth IRA income, obviously not taxed. You can pull money out of your Roth IRA and you're not going to declare any of it as income. It's not going to count toward your taxes. You can use insurance products and take loans against them when you're elderly, and then you can pull that out and it's not going to count as income. So these are all these strategies that people are using to keep their taxes down. People also have strategies to make sure that their Social Security doesn't get taxed, or it only gets taxed 50%, or it only gets taxed 85%. And that's where we're going with all of this. I'm sorry, guys, it's complicated. It's a lot of numbers. You might have to watch this video a few times, but you'll save a lot of money. It'll be worth it. So these are the thresholds that I'm saying, and hopefully you'll understand it, that if you really want to just pay 0, then you have to make sure that the income you show in a calendar year is only 13,850. You might be saying already that's not possible because of Social Security. So this is where it gets really interesting. So I'm showing you these thresholds so that you can stay in the 0% bracket or 10% or 12%. And you might think, I already know my Social Security is more than that. Well, that's where it gets really, really interesting. Why did David McKnight write this book if most people get more than the standard deduction in Social Security? Is he an idiot? No. It's really interesting how Social Security gets taxed. And I was with wealth managers after an angel investing meeting, and they didn't know how this worked. I'm not going to out anyone. I'm not going to tell you. These very, very reputable wealth managers did not know that this is the formula. Maybe because they think wealthy people don't care, but I think all people are trying to save on taxes. So here's the deal with Social Security, your benefits. Social Security looks at income. Again, I'm doing this income thing because income, what gets counted as income, it's different what gets counted as income, like, when you're earning wages, getting tips, making interest on your bank account. Like, that's obviously all wages. I mean, that's all income that would go to your taxes. But then Social Security looks at something different. They say provisional income. If they're trying to figure out if your Social Security is going to get taxed, what they do is they say, for a single person. So again, the number is going to be higher if you're married together, whatever, but let's just talk about single people. If you're single, you can have up to $25,000 in income, provisional income, and none of your Social Security will get taxed. okay, well, a lot of people go, well, that's not going to work because my Social Security is already that high. Here's how complicated it is. Here's what's not counted as provisional income. You can take out all your money. You can have your money from your Roth IRA, not considered part of provisional income. You can have a loan on your life insurance, not considered provisional income. You can pull out from the cash value of your life insurance the basis. These are dollars that you actually put in, none of the growth, none of that, but like what were the dollars that you put into your life insurance? And then this gets really complicated because some of those dollars were sucked out for fees, and some of those dollars were sucked out for what you have to pay for the life insurance and things like that. So exactly what part of your life insurance could you actually pull out again? That's complicated. But I'm just saying that once you figure it out, those dollars are not taxed because they're after-tax dollars. Okay, so that's not counted as provisional income. And then only half of your total Social Security benefit is counted as income. And it's amazing because like municipal bonds, people love municipal bonds because they're federal tax-free, but municipal bond income is counted towards Social Security. So this is why people go running to tax specialists and financial advisors, because the rules are complicated and they contradict each other, right? And so like most other forms of income are just counted straight as income. So, your pension, your wages, or whatever. So I tried to find this little visual online in terms of like, is your Social Security going to get taxed? And I'm using this example of Sally. So here's Sally with a Social Security benefit of $3,000 a month, and she has dividend income, and she has interest income, and she's under the 25,000 threshold because they don't count her Roth IRA. They don't count her loan from her life insurance. She doesn't have capital gains at this point. So all of a sudden she's getting by where none of her Social Security is getting taxed. Okay, so here we are, like, but she had $81,500 coming to her that year. This is how the Social Security math can be really, really complicated. I hope, I'm going to toggle back and forth. Maybe this is too much, but we're going to take half of Sally's Social Security, right? So the provisional income rules for Social Security say, in that calendar year, what was half of your Social Security? Well, she's making $3,000 a month. So that's $36,000 for the year. So we're taking half of that. That's $18,000, all right? Then she had dividend income. Then she had interest income. But she didn't have wages. She didn't have a pension. She didn't have capital gains. So right now she's under the 25,000. So none of her Social Security is going to get taxed, because also taking money out of her Roth doesn't get applied to her Social Security, and loans against her life insurance don't get it. So these are the things, like this is the goal, like be really strategic, plan way ahead. What kind of money are you going to tap once you have Social Security in order to not have your Social Security taxed? And by the way, like not pay any tax at all, because here she is, all of these things, her Social Security is not getting taxed. And if she, went to do her 1040 form, her income tax, the standard deduction, the $13,850, yes, she has to declare her dividends. Yes, she has to declare her interest, but those are $5,500. That's well under her standard deduction. So she's going to come, she's going to have $81,500 in a year because she planned ahead, and it's all tax-free. So this is, this is some pretty interesting stuff. There's another question in the chat. I just want to quickly, the standard deduction amounts have increased. Oh yeah, I'm not using 2024 numbers. I'm just using 2023, partly because we all just did that. And so hopefully those are familiar numbers, but they all get adjusted up. So everything for 2024 is going to be much higher. That's correct. Okay. All right. I hope you're still with me on this. I hope you guys are finding this interesting. I know it's a lot of numbers. Okay, so this is the point of the power of zero. David McKnight wants you to achieve the 0% tax like Sally did, right? And so he's a huge proponent of Roth IRAs and life insurance. That's really like, everything else is going to be familiar to you that you should save. But it's really interesting because he's like, don't put that much in your 401k or traditional IRA. It's all about the Roth. And then people say, well, I can't do a Roth because some people say, or they do it, but the contribution limits are so tiny, or the income limits say that they can't even contribute to a Roth. So this is where we're going to get to the tax law part, where it's like, for reasons I can't possibly understand, you can't contribute to a Roth, but you can convert to a Roth. And that whole part might just blow your mind. But this is what David McKnight is trying to say. Now, he also acknowledges that if you have a pension, if you're lucky enough to have a pension is a great thing. Pension typically makes the 0% tax bracket impossible because pensions are immediately added to the calculation of whether or not your Social Security is going to get taxed. So that's going to just be very, very hard. So then once you have like the 50% of your Social Security benefit plus pensions, wages, interest, dividends, capital gains, it's going to be very hard because probably then 85% of your Social Security is going to get taxed, and then boom, that's going to be larger than your standard deduction, and you're going to at least be in the 10% bracket. Okay, well, that's not terrible news. And the most important thing is, like, do you know what track you're on and where you're going? Because if you know you're going to have a pension, then you just do things differently. You don't fret about capital gains. You're not trying to have your Social Security not be taxed at all because you just know that's not going to be possible. So you understand the Social Security rules, you understand the provisional income rules, and now your strategy goes a different direction, and you're not worried about capital gains or municipal bonds or things like that, because yes, they count toward provisional income, but you just assume that 85% of your Social Security is going to get taxed. Okay, now just making sure that people understand capital gains exist and what those rates are. So, if you have an income, if you work and someone gives you a paycheck, right, that's your ordinary income that's getting taxed at those tax brackets. But if you own a stock, for example, and it goes up and you hold that stock for more than a year, you're paying long-term capital gains rates. So short-term capital gains, it's kind of confusing because it's not a capital gain rate, it's ordinary income rate. So what happens is if you have a stock, for example, and you own it for less than a year, it goes up, you bought it, you sold it in less than a year, that's just going to go to your ordinary income. So they call it a short-term capital gain, which is a little confusing because that you're not at capital gains rates. It's just going taxed at your ordinary income. But if you hold something for more than a year, or maybe it's a year and a day, I don't actually know, then that's long-term capital gains. And those rates are really reasonable, right? I mean, if you have income less than 44,000, you pay nothing. If you have income less than 492,000, you pay 15%. So this is why I said earlier, really hard to be in the 0% tax bracket. Not that hard to be in the 12% tax bracket and the 15% capital gains, bracket. So, well, this country needs the money. We're all lucky to live here. It's not terrible if you get 15% capital gains and 12%, income. That's great. And we need the money, and thank you. Okay, seriously, if you have questions, I'm actually just going to pause for a minute. If you have questions, you can unmute, which would be great. You can also put questions in the chat. We've covered 2 of the 4 areas so far. So we've covered tax brackets and the rules on Social Security. And now we're going into tax law. Obviously, tax law is, what is it? I think I've heard something that our tax laws are over 1 million words. So
isn't Social Security tax also based on what state you live in?
No. In terms of what I just showed you about the provisional income, that's all across the country. So once you receive your Social Security, and so I think what you're saying is like, maybe your Social Security benefits are taxed at the state level, has nothing to do with like, so what I showed you was only for federal. You're asking a really good question. I don't know if you pay no tax on your Social Security based on that same formula for the state, because all the state tax laws are different. So that's a really good question. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Right, this whole webinar is really just looking at the federal level, and then every state is different. California being the worst, but I love California because they have great schools, so not going to dump on them today. But that's a great question. So yeah, let me just clarify that everything I'm saying here has nothing to do with what you might owe to your state. Okay, now we've got 4 things in the chat, so let me just grab that. Your slides are very clear. That's wonderful. Great. Not sure if this question makes any sense, but if one spouse will get a pension and the other will not, are married filing jointly? Yeah, that's a really good question. Oh, that's a good question. So if you're married, is your provisional income joint provisional income? I don't know. I would think so. That's a really good question. I don't know. I'm going to write these down. I think we're going to have to follow up, Young. We can email the group
Yes,
and just,
I think this is a good question.
yeah.
I can cut and paste and then to save it. You don't have to do it. I can do it
Oh,
because
okay. Would you cut
yeah,
and paste it?
yeah,
I'll
sure, sure.
follow up
I
with
can
that.
create a Word document and I'll email to you later. That'd be
Yeah.
easier for you because you are doing your presentation. But I would assume it will be both taxed as 85% because if you're married, filing jointly, all your income is considered joint income. That's my assumption. That's my assumption.
Yeah. Okay. And, you know, I'm scrolling back up because then we've got some other questions here where should we assume Sally's scenario works before any RMDs? Those are the required minimum distributions. Yes, that's the whole point. Because if she had to take required minimum distributions from an IRA, that's when it stops, that's when it breaks down, right? So this is why David McKnight, who wrote the book, and tax planners in particular, they're sort of jumping up and down and saying the whole reason to do Roth conversions or to favor the Roth over the IRA is this whole issue of if you are facing like really high required minimum distributions, it's going to torpedo all of these numbers, right? Because yeah, so let's just make sure that people understand what required minimum distributions are. So I didn't even learn what they were until I think it was in my 40s. So, you know, you've been saving into your 401k. That's great. It gets really big. You've been at your job for 10 years. You leave your job, you go somewhere else. So now you take your 401k, you roll it into an IRA. And, you know, it grows and grows and grows, and you're aging. Well, you know, a lot of people, the numbers that I heard listening to different podcasts and things, I love listening to podcasts to learn tax law and Social Security and things like that. I mean, people would call in and they're like, I have $600,000 in my IRA. I have $2 million in my IRA. And by the way, it's still growing, right? Like even at a 6% or 7% or 8% rate, it's still, you know, could potentially double before that person gets to age 73. So the age at which you have to start taking money out of your IRA has changed. It was 70 and a half, and then it was 72, and now it's 73. So, you know, that's a moving number. But at some point, you know, you have to take money out and you have to do it in a specific way based on these required minimum distributions. So if you know, you look at these longevity tables, the IRS is like, okay, you have to start at 73. That's the absolute last time, you know, where you can keep your money in there. And then you look at your longevity table and maybe it says, we're guessing you have 18 years to live. So you're going to take all the money in your IRA and divide it by 18, and that number is your required minimum distribution. Well, that could torpedo the whole thing. If you're lucky enough to have a lot of money in your IRA, that's, fantastic. But you've spent all this time trying to hang out in like the 12% tax bracket. Now you have to take a required minimum distribution where maybe you're adding, 50,000, 100,000, to these numbers. And so now all your Social Security is taxed. And now you've bumped up into the 22% bracket and things like that. So this is this whole game, right? And now there are some people, they have $2 million in their IRA. They would be thrilled to only ever be in the 22% bracket. They've been in the 35% bracket. That's how they got the $2 million into their IRA. So everybody is different. It gets really, really confusing. And by the way, I haven't heard of one financial professional that would ever tell anybody who's in the 35 or 37% tax bracket to do a Roth conversion. Because when you convert to a Roth from a traditional IRA, the taxes are due at the time of the conversion. So if you're already or say like you're in the 24% bracket or the 22% bracket, but the conversion would bump you so high, now you're paying extraordinary taxes. So that's not the point. That's how this gets to be a real puzzle, because you have to think about how much money you've saved in traditional 401k IRA. You have to think about how much will that money grow in the next several years before, and these are all guesses, right? These are all estimates. How much will that money grow before you have to start taking your required minimum distributions? You have to then be knowledgeable about what your RMDs are going to be, and you have to come up with some number, right? So if you have 2 million today, that could be 4 million in 7 years at a 10% growth rate, right? So this gets really complicated. It's based on a lot of assumptions. And then you're 73, you have $4 million, you have to take the RMDs. Well, now your taxes are catastrophic, right? So every person is different, every scenario is different, but if you at least understand the rules, then you will understand why there's this whole like cottage industry now of tax experts and financial advisors that will sit down with you to figure out if you need to start doing Roth conversions, because you don't want to do them all in 1 year. And there's sort of a sweet spot, right, where you're over 59 and a half, so there's no chance of any penalties, and you're under the age where you were going to take your Social Security, so you're not triggering tax on your Social Security. I mean, this is a chess game puzzle on steroids. It's pretty crazy. Hopefully you're seeing that now. But that's why we get into this whole tax law part of there's a traditional IRA. You're concerned about your required minimum distributions. You'd like to get that money out of the traditional IRA now and put it into a Roth. So maybe so that you never have to pay tax on your Social Security, or maybe you are at a totally different league with millions of dollars and you're just trying to not be in a really high tax bracket once you retire. So hopefully you guys are seeing how complicated this is. I do want to check this one more message. Let's see. So this one says Connecticut taxes Social Security. So that's interesting. So all this provisional income and all this stuff, that was at the federal level where you could just kind of get around and not have any of your Social Security taxed. But state by state, it's going to be different. So that's really interesting. And then Young's going to grab those questions that I didn't have the answers to, and then we can email you guys later. Anyone who's signed up, we have your email, and we can just answer those and clarify those. Okay, so we are at the tax law level, and obviously tax law is enormous, and people, study for years to understand the tax law. So we're just taking this tiny, tiny piece, which is you have a traditional IRA. Should you convert it to a Roth, like in stages, maybe, maybe like 50,000, for every year for the next 4 years. I mean, this is all these things that people do because, you're worried about the required minimum distributions later, or maybe you're not so much worried about that. You're worried about having to show income so that your Social Security is going to get taxed, right? Or maybe you have a lot of money in a traditional IRA and you're worried about, if something happens to you and it goes to your kids, it's not the best way for your kids to inherit money. So some people really worry about this, like, especially if your kids are high earners, there is a rule about inheriting an IRA. I think it's called the 10-year rule, where whoever gets the IRA or however it's divvied up among your heirs, they have to show, I don't want to say take the distribution or pull money out or however we say it. And then they're going to pay tax on that money, because the IRA money, the traditional IRA, taxes have never been paid, right? So that was the whole deal. You're earning money, you stuff money into an IRA, that lowers the income you have to show in that calendar year for your tax. So the money sitting in the IRA has never been taxed. The growth in the IRA has never been taxed. The IRS wants their money. So, you're going to pull out the money, it's going to get taxed, or your heirs are going to pull out the money and they have to pull it out within 10 years. Or there are extreme penalties, like crazy penalties. So for all of those reasons, people are really looking at Roth conversions. Strangest thing, I cannot explain it. Why would there be so many rules, restrictive rules about you can only put a tiny amount in your Roth IRA? A lot of people can't use the Roth at all because their income is too high. Why would they have all these strict rules? However, anybody at any time can do a Roth conversion in any amount. Makes no sense to me. So if you thought Roth was off limits, no. You can do a Roth limit, any amount, anytime. You just, whatever's in your IRA, when you go to pull it out, the taxes are due immediately, right? Like, and this is a pay-as-you-go system. So be really careful. Like, it's not just, I'm going to pull 100,000 out. My tax bracket is 22%. I know I'm going to owe 22,000. This is a pay-as-you-go system. You owe it as soon as you take it out, like within the 90 days, because our pay-as-you-go system is sort of a 4-quarter system. It's every 90 days. So definitely, please don't get hit with penalties where you took the money out in like February of this year. You're going to do that this February, and then you don't pay it all year thinking you're going to pay it the next April. Like, please don't do that. Okay. So, yeah. So should you do a Roth conversion, right? How often should you do a Roth conversion? This is why you would want to read David McKnight's book. This is why you would want to think about your particular circumstances and your particular tax situation. People do these for all different reasons, but one really, really big reason for wealthy people is that they are concerned that they are going to go into a much higher tax bracket once they have to take their required minimum distributions. And this is a big fuss that David McKnight makes in the book. But I have a slide on this. I don't know if it's, oh, okay. So David McKnight argues that the tax rates that we have now are the best tax rates we've ever seen, ever, since, well, I guess when did we start having like this kind of tax code? World War II or whatever. In our life, he says in our lifetime, right? These are the best tax rates, the most favorable tax rates we'll see in our lifetime. So another reason to do Roth conversions is to be, a pessimist and say, we know for certain that if the laws don't change, these tax rates are expiring. They expire, they revert back to what they were in 2017. So that's going to happen no matter what, unless lawmakers intervene. The law as it reads now is that everything reverts to the higher tax rates from 2017. So we know that for a fact. But then David McKnight goes even further and he's very pessimistic. He says this country has so much debt, right? We have these ballooning deficits, enormous debt. We have to have higher tax rates, period. So he thinks that the 22% tax rate is just going to be a thing of the past. So even if you run the numbers today and you say, I think I'm fine because I'm in the 22%, I think I'll stay in the 22%, it's all going to even out. He says, just do the Roth conversion because chances are you're 22% now. We know you're going to be 25% tax rate when the tax rules revert. And it's probably going to be much worse later down the line because taxes are going to have to go up for people who have good incomes, people who have the $200,000, $300,000 incomes. So that's a big, big part of his book is you're making a lot of assumptions about your longevity, about your income, about the growth rate of your savings. But he's saying one thing you have to add to all of these assumptions is the assumption that tax rates will never be this good again. So pay the tax now and then let your money grow tax-free. And then you'll take it out at another time where you're going to be so happy because the tax brackets are going to be so much worse. Let me just take a quick peek at this. Can you do a Roth conversion if you already have a Roth IRA? Yes. Yeah. So it's just like whatever money's hanging out in your traditional IRA gets rolled over or converted to your Roth IRA. Yeah. Can an inherited traditional IRA be converted to a Roth? I don't know. I mean, I don't think it works that way. Like, I just think like somebody who inherited a traditional IRA can have their own Roth and no one's going to really ask the questions about where the money's coming from, but wherever the money comes, whatever money flows into that Roth, the taxes are going to be paid on it, I would think. Yeah. But again, look, I'm not a tax expert. I just play one on TV. It's amazing how complicated this is, right? So I'm a generalist, almost like if you go to your general doctor, but then they're going to refer you to a cardiologist or refer you to a podiatrist or whatever. Like it just starts to get super, super complicated. Those are great questions, but I just, I don't know about that one. But you know what? Young is writing this down, so we will get back to you on that one. Okay, so we've got the looming pessimistic, horrible, the tax rates are going to get worse. So if you have money sitting in your traditional IRA, maybe convert it just to be, or some of it, a portion of it, right? That's so much of this is just food for thought. What do you think would work for you? You could keep half in your IRA and convert half to Roth, and you do it over a series of years so you don't bump up your tax bracket in any one year. That's, you know, this is the whole puzzle. This is the whole game. So the funny thing is that, you know, you would think that David McKnight, who's so into the 0% tax bracket, when he's talking about Roth conversions, I mean, he's trying to get people to be very mindful of tax brackets, but he's saying that he loves the 24% tax bracket, right? So don't be afraid of doing a Roth conversion if it would put you in the 24% tax bracket. You know, if you're going to take a big chunk and convert it now and have to pay the taxes now on top of whatever your other income is, maybe that will push you into the 24% bracket. But he's saying that, like, he just thinks taxes are going to be terrible in the future. They'll never be this good again. And why not give yourself the peace of mind of having a pot of money that you can tap at any time later in life, and there are no tax consequences. Doesn't hit your provisional income calculation on your Social Security, doesn't hit your federal income. It can't hit your state. I mean, I'm not an expert on state taxes, but like, how could, you know, the whole point of the Roth is you've already paid your taxes. They should grow tax-free. But you know, what's going on at the state level, different for every state, I can't say for sure. But the whole thing about what's going on at the state level is kind of like the interesting piece of all of this. So I'm going to look forward to investigating that. Okay. This is my own personal plug. You know, we're talking about being careful with money and not having to pay so much to the IRS. And, you know, another thing that you can always do as you're figuring out these calculations is, you have a lot of money sitting in a traditional IRA, or, you know, you have a lot of money in your 401k that you know eventually will be in an IRA, and then we'll eventually going to figure out if you're going to do the Roth. But you can always donate to charity, right? So if you're worried about like pulling money out of a traditional IRA and what that will do to your taxes, you can always make charitable contributions. They have to be straight from your IRA. This is really important. Do not take money out of your IRA, give it to yourself, and then write a check to a charity. That is totally different. I am talking about a charitable, I think it's called a qualified charitable distribution, where you direct the custodian of your IRA to write a check from your IRA to the charity. And then that all happens tax-free, right? So obviously you've reduced the amount in your IRA, but you've given like a wonderful gift to some meaningful charity. And then it's never counted as income to you. So I think that's something really, really important to keep in mind as you're doing all these puzzle pieces. Let's see. Can you do a Roth conversion if you already have a Roth IRA? Yes. Is stopping contributing to 401k equal to convert the same amount to a Roth IRA? So should you stop contributing to a 401k? Okay, well, if you're getting a match, you want to always contribute up to the match because that's like 100% gain. If you stop contributing to a 401k equal to convert the same amount to a Roth IRA? Is it equal from like a tax perspective?
That's my question. I mean, if for example, if I contribute 30,000 per year to Roth to 401k, right, to save tax, if I stop, is it the same as I convert 30,000 regular IRA to Roth IRA? Is it the same or not?
So
clear?
in one sense,
Regardless of matching, if there's no matching policy,
right?
For tax wise, so what do you think? Is it the same? I stopped contributing.
Well, I mean, it's very, the difference is like, you're putting 30,000 in your 401k, so you know it's not getting counted as your income, right? And I don't know what your husband earns, right? So I don't know what your strategy is.
Oh, I understand. It's still different. It's still different. It's not, doesn't equal. Stop contributing, it's not equal. I got it.
Okay. Okay. If you give to charity directly from your traditional 401k, can you still take the charity deduction? No. Yeah. And also, when something's in 401k form, I don't know, like, because then like your office, your business is the custodian or whatever. I don't know that they do that. Maybe they do, but it's very well known that once an IRA is at like a typical custodian, like, Schwab Fidelity, it's kind of in your control, not something where you have to wait. You know how like when things are at your business and it's a 401k and you can only do certain things certain times of year or once a year or whatever. So I don't know that you can direct a charitable contribution from a 401k. I don't know, but I know you can from an IRA. But no, then you can't deduct it. Yeah, no, because it's never come to you as income. So yeah. I hope I'm right on that. Okay, this is why you need a tax expert. Okay. All right, so we haven't even gotten, I want to make sure I got to, okay, the RMDs, the no tax to the heirs. Okay, the 5-year rule. I just wanted to make sure that this was clear. When you put money into a Roth IRA, the thinking is that any money you pull out of a Roth IRA is always tax-free. But the thing is, you put money into a Roth IRA, you can pull the exact amount you put in out at any time, but it's immediately as you put it in there, if you have investments, it's growing, hopefully. And then you cannot pull out any of the growth for 5 years. So again, this is like tax law gets very complicated. You want to be really careful of the rules. Okay, we did that. Okay, so now the whole thing with life insurance. So this is this last leg, right? Like where were we? We were here and we said this whole chess match, this whole game is based on 4 major themes: tax brackets, Social Security, tax law, and insurance, all right? So the insurance piece is by far the most controversial. I just want to make that really clear. So like financial gurus, like the Susan Ormans of the world and the Dave Ramseys of the world, they broadcast, they can't stand life insurance. They think the fees are way too high, it's too complicated, people are getting cheated, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, some very wealthy people, it's like an essential part of their estate plan and how they manage to transfer wealth. And then other people really believe in the benefits because even if you're not going to, like, it's not about passing away and having a death benefit, but there are whole life policies that will let you sort of use the benefits of the life insurance if you need long-term care. So instead of going out and getting long-term care insurance, which you hope you never need and which happens to be very expensive, you can use your life insurance, not term life. These are like, true life insurance, like whole life, universal life policies. You can use your life insurance to, if heaven forbid you needed long-term care, you can access your life insurance benefits and sort of siphon them off for long-term care. So this is very complicated, but this is another thing that David McKnight likes to point out, probably because he sells life insurance, that people should factor in. So, okay. So it's, life insurance is this fourth piece. It's much more than just the death benefit. It's tax-free income to your heirs, right? Heaven forbid you pass away, it's tax-free income, to the beneficiaries. So that's nice. It's tax-free income to your heirs. So that whole 10-year rule about inheriting a traditional IRA doesn't apply. So especially if you have like a high earner heir and you're not going to torpedo, their tax return with, this nice gift. And so, people use these things for different reasons. I do want you to know that there are pros and cons of the whole life insurance game. And the pros and cons are hotly debated in the personal finance realm. Having said that, leading up to this webinar, I just asked people I was hanging out with, very smart, capable, educated, high earner people, and everybody had life insurance, not term insurance. Everybody had some form of real life insurance. So tells me something. There's something there. Okay, well, let's see what this question is in the chat. We are almost done, by the way. You guys have been great. Do hybrid insurance long-term care work the same as life insurance? So if it's a hybrid, if it is life insurance with long-term care, then that's the life insurance I'm talking about. So that hybrid is the thing that David McKnight, the author, is talking about, that I'm talking about. If it's solely long-term care, that's just different. But these things that you can pass on to heirs, these things that have death benefits, these things that you can take a loan from the cash value and that loan is not taxed, that's what I'm talking about. So I don't know that they call it a hybrid as much. It's just you just happen to know that you have that benefit. Okay. So what was our last? Okay, we already did the favorable tax rates. So this was this whole point that if you are thinking about Roth conversions, even if they bump you up into the 24% bracket in the short term, before you've taken your Social Security, he's saying this could be a good idea. He's saying, like, you're sort of in this sweet spot of, like, maybe you've retired, you're 61, you're 62, you haven't taken your Social Security yet, but you want to do these Roth conversions because you're thinking about the future, and maybe you want to squeeze them in 2 or 3 years. Don't be afraid of that 24% bracket. This is David McKnight talking, because he firmly believes that if you've got a lot of money, you're going to get killed with taxes later that's sitting in your traditional IRA. So this is his personal opinion. You got to have to develop your own opinion. But then he likes the fact that if you push all that money into the Roth before you've taken your Social Security, if you're super good and super clever, you're going to figure out a way to take your Social Security tax-free, or maybe only taxed at 50%, and you're going to have these Roth distributions, and you're going to be in a much lower tax bracket. So this is his idea. And I say donate to charity. Don't forget that part. Just planning ahead. We hope you'll join us. Our next webinar is October 22nd, same time, 7 p.m. It's all about asset allocation. So of course, we're going to get into the stocks and bonds and global versus, United States and things like that, and real estate. But we're going to spend some time talking about how the really, really smart money people do it. The best financial people in the world, the people running the Princeton endowment, the Yale endowment, the Harvard endowment, the people running the biggest pension funds. So it'll be really fun. Some of it is not applicable. Like, I personally can't start giving my money to a hedge fund, nor would I want to because of the tax consequences. We've been talking about taxes. They wouldn't take my money and I wouldn't want it anyway. But it'll be interesting to see what the smart money is doing, the big money, and then drill it down to what should you be doing, or, what should you be considering? So that's October 22nd. And yeah, this is just how you can get in touch with me. Money in Your 20s is my business. That was my first book. My second book is Investing, Your Lively Jargon-Free Guide to Getting Started. And my email. And let me just look at these last questions. Looking forward to the next webinar. Well, thank you. That's great. So am I. That's awesome. Okay, so we definitely have some more time. And
is your book out now, the investing one?
I'm sorry, what?
Is your book out now, the investing one?
Oh, it is, yes. And does the library have, the library has 4 copies of my first book. I can't remember how many copies they have of my second book.
Let me check.
Okay, I know it, obviously available on Amazon, but hopefully, as you've seen, I really like to make complex topics a little easier to understand, relatable, visual, blah, blah, blah.
We have investing.
Oh, good. Do you only have 1 copy?
We have 2 copies. It's available on shelf right now. Yeah, we have it now.
Yay! Okay, perfect. Fantastic. Well, you guys have been great. If you have any more questions, even if I can't answer it now, it'll be added to the questions that we're going to follow up with. Because I really want to delve. That's so interesting about what's going on with the states. Obviously, I can't look at all the states, but it's nice to sort of check out Connecticut, New York, California, kind of get a sense of Florida. Right.
I think Connecticut is one of the only states that does tax. It's one of 7.
New England.
Yeah, but I think there's only like 10 states that tax Social Security, and we're one of them.
Oh, I really want to find this out now. That is which states tax Social Security? I'm going to Google that right after this webinar. That's super.
I already did this.
What?
All the New England ones too.
All the New England ones?
Not New Hampshire.
Yeah, they do.
Not New Hampshire, I don't think.
Well, New Hampshire. It's New Hampshire.
Live free or die, right?
Right.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. All right, let's see this last one in the chat, and then we will follow up. Oh, great job. Okay, thank you. Thanks, everybody. This was really fun. I'm exhausted. I hope. Oh,
Thank you,
okay.
Kristen. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye now.
All right, signing off.
Okay, I'll stop recording.
Okay, thanks so much, Young.
Thank you, Kristen. I'll email you the questions. I think you answered them all. But
Well, I got to drill down to the states, but yeah, let's
I'll
make sure yeah, okay, perfect. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, bye.